Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. This is the very first time that I'm sharing about my NFT journey. So it's a new thing for me. And yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing that. So to start off, I've been interested in biology since a very early age. But when I was around 8 years old, an uncle of mine gave me for Christmas a microscope. And it's this one, actually. And what this did is it showed me a whole new set of life forms that existed that weren't visible to the naked eye. And it made me think about how there is so much more to what we can actually see every day. There are so many life forms everywhere. And when I was introduced to machine learning later on in 2018, I found out that there is this tool that allows me to extract patterns from large data sets. And in a way, it's kind of doing something similar to the microscope. It allows me to see things that I wouldn't directly be able, or maybe intuitively I would have an idea, but it allows me to see something that isn't within my set of skill to generate by hand. I can generate like hundreds and hundreds of variations of a texture of jellyfish, for instance, just by training one of these algorithms. So AI became a tool that, or a set of tools that were really important for me artistically to express what I wanted to express. And in 2018, we didn't have Runway ML. I think it was just at the very beginning. All the interfaces that we had to create art with AI, there was no DALL-E, were really rough. So you had to learn a lot about like how to set up a remote GPU on the cloud. Like Google Cloud is a pain to set up, uploading a data set to a server that connects to another thing with the Docker image. Anyways, there were a lot of technical things that I had to learn as an artist, as somebody who doesn't come from an engineering background, just to be able to do what I wanted to do. But I was fascinated by that. And one of the reasons for that is that in a way, artificial neural networks are vaguely inspired by the functioning of biological neural networks. So to me, there was this parallel of generating artificial life forms, but with an algorithm that in a way kind of resembles a biological process. So these were some of the first things I did. They were jellyfish, because I'm personally really fascinated by jellyfish. And this went from aquatic creatures at the beginning, but later I kept adding different creatures. And so eventually it had to become a series of its own. It's called Neural Zoo. And it's been going on since 2018, but I never get tired of adding more and more specimens, so I cannot say that the series is finished. And later on, this idea of these generated life forms made me think about how we looked at nature before cameras existed. So I went back to look for really old illustrations, and I trained models on those illustrations to generate new variations of them. And this became another series called Artificial Natural History. And to me, this is a way of meditating on how we extract kind of patterns from nature, how we look and see like, okay, this is a fish, and I'm gonna categorize this as a fish and put all the fish together there. So yeah, this series is very dear to me, and again, like I spent so many hours just looking all these really old illustrations and generating new variations of them. And eventually, I discovered the work of Anna Atkins, And she was a pioneer in photography. She's the first person to publish a book of photographs, but she was a botanist. So to me, it was really inspired to find the work of this woman who, in the 19th century, was really working with a new technology at the time and making it do something that hadn't been done yet. And I wanted to use the same analog photographic technique that she used, which is the cyanotype, to create kind of a new reinterpretation of that, more contemporary reinterpretation. So I took some of my specimens and I printed them myself, of course, in this kind of style. And I really, really like seeing them printed like that. So suddenly, when I did this, my process was no longer just digital, just in front of a computer training an AI model. It also had a part which was purely by hand, and it felt very entropic in a way. It's very chaotic to work by hand when you're used to work with software. And another thing is that in 2019, I met my studio partner and we started a small artist studio together called Entangled Others. And we wanted to push this idea of generative life forms. So we trained a 3D GAN and we created this series called Artificial Remnants, which are basically 3D insects. But we also generated a full kind of biological study of them. So it's all speculative, of course, training a text AI to generate the name of the insects and the anatomical parts. And we made web experiences and even really huge inflatable sculptures or polyjet sculptures as well. This took a lot of different shapes. But of course, in the meantime, I had to make a living because art is great, but how do you make a living from that? And my main source of income at this point was giving talks and teaching about AI and exhibitions. And that's okay. It allowed me to survive and pay rent, but we weren't secured financially in a way that we say, will I be able to pay rent in the next 3 months? I don't know. It was very uncertain. And to me, my journey with NFTs, the first time that I actually, it wasn't even NFTs what I was introduced to, but my journey itself began with this show, which was really important to me. It was this show that took place in 2019 in Zurich, and it was organized by Ketvas Gallery, but it was curated by Arnaud and George Back. And it included a set of amazing artists. And after the show, the gallery told me, would you be interested in minting a work on the blockchain? And I had no idea what that was. And I started researching and I saw a bunch of Bitcoin logos that were sold for a lot of money, and I couldn't understand exactly what that meant. But as somebody who's really interested in technology, I kept researching and trying to understand. And eventually I said, okay, fine, let's do it. And I minted with them. They minted it on my behalf, actually, my first NFT work. And to my surprise, Artgnome collected it. And I had never in my life seen a curator collect a work from an artist that they curated from a show. I was like, what? And I didn't know what this meant, but I was like, okay, great. But then it didn't stop there. I decided to mint my first NFT on Super Rare later on. and Hakatao collected it. And I wasn't familiar with them as well, so I didn't know what that meant either. I was like, okay, cool, somebody collected it. I'm really surprised. I didn't think anybody would care about this. But at this point, I encountered for the first time the concept of scarcity. I was told, Sofia, you should be careful. Don't mint too many works. You have to create scarcity. And I was like, what the hell does that mean? Like, for the first time, I'm putting works out in digital format, which is the native format of my work. And I have so much work to offer, but you're telling me that I cannot mint more because I have to create an artificial scarcity. It was really strange. And I think that, I don't know if this probably happened to a lot of other artists too, but this felt like a really alien concept that I hadn't thought about that much. And I feel like in general, in the group of artists or in the artist ecosystem, there wasn't a lot of like financial literacy in general. Like, these concepts weren't that something we talked about in general, like, oh, how's your artwork? What do you think about artificial scarcity? Like, nobody was saying that. But I kept on going, but very slowly because I was a bit scared about that. So in July 2020, I released this work that was a bundle. And it was the first time that I did a physical piece, a cyanotype, that goes together with a digital piece. And that was really meaningful to me. It took me several months to do the physical work. It's 2 meters long on fabric. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture of it framed. Hope if the collector sees this, that they send me a picture. But this was a really, really meaningful piece for me because it was the first time that my cyanotype practice was kind of legitimately collected. And I was very, very lucky to meet X Shells. And we started talking, and I told her about all my fears around NFTs, all the things that I had heard. And she was somebody who, well, as a Latin American artist, she inspired me a lot. And she seemed really set to support me and guide me through this space. So that was really a before and after collaborating with her. The experience for me was really meaningful. But still, for a while, a lot of what I felt was, I felt really overwhelmed when I went on Twitter or when I went on social media, because I felt this pressure that everything I put out has to be sold out. Everything I put out has to somehow be successful, and if not, that doesn't look good for me as an artist. And suddenly I had to think about all these things that maybe a gallerist would think for me, but now I was on my own doing all of this. And it felt like a lot, honestly. I didn't want to have this kind of pressure to sell, to be sold out, to perform in that way. For me, that wasn't what the important part of the project was, even though I did want to make a living through my work. And I felt like nobody was really talking about this, or maybe I didn't know the people who were talking about like this pressure that an artist can feel in the space. The pressure to kind of advertise ourselves in a way like, look at my work, it's great. Sometimes like I just couldn't put myself in that space. I just wanted to talk genuinely without the commercial pressure. But so coming from here, for me, I was very nervous when X basically reached out to me and said, like, you're one of the artists that we're curating for the Sotheby's show. I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? I need to make something really important. And so I made this work that's called Transmutation of Species. And to me, it's really meaningful because it talks about the way that we see creatures from the natural history perspective that I mentioned earlier. How we see a butterfly or a collection of butterflies or a species as a kind of discrete entity. But in reality, there isn't a discrete entity of butterflies. There are butterflies, but they're not just one thing. Butterflyness could have a huge set of interpretations to it. So after that, and the auction going successfully, which was very nerve-wracking, I felt more confident, and I said, you know what? I'm going to release a 500 101 piece, set of works. And we did that through my studio, Entangled Others, this year. And we released this collection, Chimerical Stories, on Braindrops, which is a platform particularly dedicated to AI art. And to us, this was, again, about butterflies and jellyfish. My collaborator, Felican, his name actually means butterfly in Gaelic. And my most meaningful creature was the jellyfish. So in a way, we combined kind of our own person into it, but at the same time, this whole idea of the life cycle of the jellyfish merging with the life cycle of a butterfly. And we combined, to do that, we merged two neural networks, taking the lower layers of one and the upper layers of the other. So the shape of the butterfly life cycle and the texture of the jellyfish. And just as a fun fact, jellyfish have even more than 5 life stages. It's really amazing, and sometimes they can even go back and be younger again. So some jellyfish are, like, in a way, you could say they're immortal, just because they don't age in the way that we do. So, well, after this, this was like, these 2 experiences were like really radically, they really changed my way of seeing the space. And I realized how lucky I was to be able to do that. And so I felt I connected much more to my collectors, and I realized, like, wow, without this space, I wouldn't be able to actually, connect with all these people. I wouldn't be able to have all these conversations. And also the community, I felt like suddenly the community to me felt much more relevant to be a part of, and I suddenly wanted to be more engaged in what was being talked about. I wanted to talk to curators and other artists, and I realized how valuable that was. So yeah. Well, another experience that I had, which was one of the most meaningful as well so far, was that I had the chance to do my first solo show, which to every artist is like a really big deal, right? But I never thought that my first solo show would be an NFT solo show. So on one hand, I had this insane opportunity, but on the other hand, I was like extremely nervous, like how is this gonna go? So I had to like practice detachment to be like, you know what I care most about is that people get to see this and that they get to experience it and they take something from that, whatever that is, even if they hate it. I want people to feel something through my work, right? And I'm very lucky that, well, fortunately it went well. This was at Vellum LA this year. And yeah, we showed 11 works from artificial natural history. And we also showed these 9 works from sediment nodes, which is made with my studio in Dangle, Dallas. And well, just as the last thing I want to share with you, when I was in high school, I had to I took a acting class, and the teacher made us do this kind of trust fall exercise where you have a bunch of people that are like holding you, but you don't really know. There's a mattress. You don't really know if they're gonna hold you or not. The teacher gives them the cue, like hold her or don't hold her, let her fall. And in a way, I realized there's a lot of parallels with how I felt in the space. Like sometimes when I release something, it's like I just have to let myself fall without knowing what's really gonna happen. Is somebody gonna buy this work? I don't know, but all I can do is keep trying. So, in a way, it's an exercise of trust. So, thank you very much for your time.